We're joined by Tom Rivers now of ABC News, who is covering the details of the search for this Malaysian plane that, it's been dominating the news now for quite a few days.
Almost 2 weeks tomorrow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really quite a mystery. Tom, look, the latest thing has been the search off the south and western coast of Australia. Actually, it's not just off the coast. It's way out in the middle of the South Indian Ocean. And they've been out sending out the search planes and the ships and all manner of stuff. What did they find?
Well, sadly, the first of those 5 planes today have returned, and just like yesterday, they've seen nothing, not even debris that may not have anything to do with Flight 370. But as the Prime Minister says, look, we owe it to the relatives of those that were on the plane to carry on. So certainly in the short and medium term, that's going to be the standard operating procedure. More assets as well are converging on the area. You may recall that story about those people that were stranded on the ice in Antarctica a few months ago.
Right.
Exactly. Well, remember the Chinese icebreaker that kind of was one of the 3 that were there doing their thing? That is still there. So it's coming to the area, and there's at least a helicopter asset there that may prove to be useful. A Norwegian car carrier is there as well. So everything is focused on what can be done in this narrowed but still large chunk of water that various countries now are doing their best to try to comb.
And unfortunately, as you know, we're in D.C., so we're on a different time zone. But we've already gone to the second day of searches out of Australia. It's just ended, and nothing again. It's just such a disappointment.
Exactly. It's frustrating, and it's kind of weird too. Talking to some of our people in Kuala Lumpur. The families there, they kind of 2 days ago, their emotions kind of really boiled over, and we're yelling at the hotel where the press briefings are being held. They're kind of subdued now because they know that if debris that can be identified is from the plane, that kind of shoots their hopes down as long as those hopes are there. So it's kind of a weird thing at this stage of the game, 2 weeks down the road for these people still to have absolutely no answers.
And there is at least the possibility that this is another false lead. We don't know for sure.
That's debris. I've heard it could be anything. It could be just the light reflection.
It could be anything. It could be, a lot of stuff, falls off of container ships in the middle of nowhere. And, it's not unusual. You remember that early on in this investigation, remember it was somebody cited something. They said it's the plane Chinese door. Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah.
And, well, it turned out to be a big chunk of wood, cable wheel.
How sure are we that even this location, at this point, are we 100% sure this is the location the plane went down?
They are working, again, they're refined behind the scenes, trying to refine the search in this quote-unquote corridor that goes all the way up to Kazakhstan in the north down to the south. They think that based on pings, it went south, and they say based upon that and looking at some of the currents, et cetera, they think it's in this particular area. And, you and I, we're not too sure, but the head of the emergency response down in Australia says it's the best lead we've had so far.
Now,
so we take that at face value and say, okay, then that's why the assets are there.
We're sending ships in there. Some cases it takes ships 2-3 days to get there.
Yep.
Right.
The closest ships are 3 days away. That's how vast this area is. So that's one problem. You got planes that are flying. They're dealing with clouds. They're dealing with other things and a vast area to search, and that's one of the things. But there are also other assets that are probably converging on the area that they don't like to talk about. Right, Tom?
What is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. This came up in the presser a couple hours ago, Kuala Lumpur. So a reporter said, look, if it takes 3.5 hours to get there and 3.5 hours to get back, and you got about 2.5 hours in the search area, why don't you get a tanker up there to help out? And non-committal was the acting transport secretary, but he did say he'd be talking to Defense Secretary Hagel later on today. So maybe that might be in the mix. That might be useful to get these planes that are finally out there to hang on station for a few hours longer.
The asset that I was referring to, though, is one that they will never talk about. That's the movement of submarines.
Exactly.
Why would that be a secret?
Well, because they don't like to talk about where the submarines are.
Oh, but of course. Why aren't the submarines there? I should have thought of my solution. I'm going to figure this all out.
What about that, Tom?
It can be very useful, but the more you get into this, and that might be about the only way you can actually get a fix on maybe a beacon from one of the 2 black boxes. Having said that, you got to be in the neighborhood to pick those things up. You know, they don't go for hundreds of miles. So you got to be pretty darn close to these things.
And
so,
are we? And how they say the black box or I don't know if it's the black box or the recorder. Which one lasts for a month of a battery life?
They both last they both last about 30 days, maybe a little more if you're lucky. In this case, if it did go down there, that water's about 10,000 feet deep.
Wow.
So you have to have, yeah, exactly.
10,000 leagues under the sea.
And I understand there's something called current strata or temperature strata in the water that can actually reflect the ping so that it doesn't go very far.
Yeah, and it, you know, how many countries would have something in that capability that they can get it to that area that quickly, and you're racing against the clock. And you think back to Air France. Remember that the lost plane from Brazil,
right,
to Paris a few years ago now. But on the heels of that, one of the recommendations that I understand may be coming in a few years is to extend the battery life of these so-called black boxes from 30 days to 90 days and make that the standard internationally. Why? Because normally you don't need 90 days, but hey, you know, here's an example where maybe 90 days would be incredibly useful.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful.
But even if we get the black box, we were talking about this earlier.
One of the black boxes is a voice recorder, which is on a loop, and the only thing it would have recorded was the last 2 hours. Now, if indeed this is the plane, it flew for 5-6 hours from the time we last knew where it was.
Changed in the
so,
cockpit.
so we're never going to have the recordings of what happened in that cockpit.
Yeah, it's tough.
Unless they said something in the last 2 hours, like about if they have a message.
One of the theories, as you know, guys, is that some action was taken because there could have been a mechanical problem, whatever. In essence, then everybody was knocked out, and this thing just went on its set course until the fuel ran out because the last ping was 7.5 hours, down the line. So that is one theory.
If indeed that is, we probably never really know what caused the deal. The data recorders will be helpful, but the voice recorders are not going to provide much if that is indeed the case, unless there was something active going in as they went right into the water.
And even beyond that, if this plane is 10,000 feet, I mean, it will never be recovered. The bodies will never be recovered.
No.
For these families, how will they? It's just so sad.
Well, again, we continue to stay up to date on the latest of this. Tom Rivers, thank you, ABC News reporter, who's been following all the details of Flight 370.